Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Georges River Local Planning Panel for the 21st of September 2023. My name is Stephen Alchin and I am the chair of the panel. The panel is currently streaming to you from the council offices in McMahon Street in Hurstville. The members who make up the panel today are, on my right, Judy Clark, an expert panel member. On my immediate left, Juliet Grant, another expert panel member. And on the far left, Fiona Podrimu, who is the community representative on the panel. We're the panel who've been appointed by the Minister for Planning to determine specified development applications, including the applications that are on the agenda today, in accordance with the requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. The Georges River Local Planning Panel acknowledges the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of all lands, water and sky in the Georges River area. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who live, work and meet on these lands. I'm required to advise you that under provisions of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, this meeting of the panel is being live streamed and will be made available on Council's website. In accordance with revised meeting protocols, interested parties wishing to make representations to the panel were requested to register a summary of their interests. A total of 5 registrations were received and forwarded to the panel. The panel has reviewed the registrations and advised council officers they wish to hear oral submissions from the following persons, who will be called during the course of the meeting in order of the agenda items as published on the council's website. They are, in respect of the development application at Shaw Street, Kogarah, Robert Jones. Secondly, Elise Bork. Thirdly, Anthony Charbel. And fourthly, Rhonda Jamlui. Then the final person who's registered an interest is concerns the development application at 29 Penshurst Street in Penshurst, where Mr. James Lewis is asked to talk to the panel. The panel has received completed assessment reports from council staff for the 3 development applications that are on the agenda today. The panel has undertaken inspections of the sites and nearby localities for the 3 matters that are on the agenda. We'll deal with each application in order as published on council's website, be DA 2021/0372 at 2 Shaw Street, Kogarah, involving demolition or proposed demolition and construction of a boarding house, landscaping and site works. Secondly, modification 2022/10139 for 25 to 27 Heath Road in Blakehurst. This is a modification of an existing development consent, number DA 2017/0290, for construction of a 2 to 3 storey childcare centre for 145 children with basement parking. The third final application is DO 2022/0521 for 29 Penshurst Street, Penshurst, for extension of trading hours of the hotel in question. As required by the Local Planning Panel's Code of Conduct, panel members are required to disclose any interest or conflicts of interest in respect of any matter on the agenda for a panel meeting. The relevant forms, as prescribed by the New South Wales Department of Planning, have been completed and are tabled for council to be included in the online minutes of the meeting. Fiona Podrimu declared interest in item LPP 027-23 for 2 Shaw Street, Kogarah, and will take no part in the discussions or deliberations on that particular application. As we progress through the matters on the agenda, only those persons who registered to speak will be able to make verbal representations to the panel. Each person who has registered to speak is requested to limit their presentation to 3 minutes. I would ask those persons that are invited to speak to the panel via Teams that they speak clearly and at a volume that will project into the speakers to assist those viewing the live streaming so they can hear clearly what is being said. To manage the live streaming process, all speakers should leave their camera and microphone turned off until their turn to speak has been called. At this time, I remind those persons that any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language used in their comments may result in the author being exposed to liability for which council and the panel take no responsibility. Once we've heard all the oral submissions on a particular application, we'll move on to the next application. Members of the public are free to continue to listen to the broadcast. The determination of the applications will be made in closed session, which is not live streamed or recorded. The determination will be available on Council's website once confirmed by the panel. This will usually occur within 2 to 3 days of the meeting being held. That's the end of my introduction. So I'll now call the first item, which is people who would like to address the panel in relation to the development application for 2 Shaw Street, Penshurst, at Blakers rather. Could I ask Robert Jones? Yes, Robert Jones, to come to the table. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Jones. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to address the panel. My name is Bob Jones and I reside at 42 Batty Avenue, Beverley Park. I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Kogarah Bay Progress Association, who represent the local community. Our association understands the need to provide additional affordable housing, particularly in these times of high rents and cost of living crisis. However, we do not believe development should be at any cost, particularly when a site is not appropriate for development of this nature. Before I discuss the association's concerns, it is my opinion that this application should have been prepared by an independent town planning consultant, having regard to the fact that council sold this parcel of land to the current owner in October 2020, only 12 months prior to the submission of this DA. This land is only 344 square metres in area, with a street frontage of 6 metres, whereas Georges River Council's own LEP requires new residential lots to be a minimum 450 square metres. This site is not subject to the LEP, as it has been in its existence for many decades, but its small area and minimum street frontage are the reasons why this development fails council's codes in many areas. I wish to highlight 3 areas of concern regarding the application, namely the design of the building, the character of the area, and the plan of management, which does not stipulate that the building be managed by a registered social housing provider. After a number of attempts by the applicant to address council's urban planner's concerns, it is still apparent that council's urban planner, who mentions a number of times in the comments that they still do not support the design, particularly on the Shaw Street elevation and street activation along the laneway at ground level. Our association agrees with the council's urban planner in that the design is not appropriate in its current form. Clause 30A of the Housing SEP states that council cannot grant consent to a boarding house unless it has taken into consideration whether the design is compatible with the character of the area. The report quotes many judgments by the Land and Environment Court to justify that the proposal should be supported. However, when one examines the architectural plans showing 2 stories extending down 75% of the site and the smallest amount of green space in front of the primary building line, it is quite evident that this development is not compatible with the rest of the dwellings in Shaw Street and does not meet the objective of Clause 30A. Our association campaigned for many years to have the housing SEP for boarding houses changed so that these buildings were managed by a registered social housing provider. The state government has now introduced a new housing SEP, which requires all boarding houses approved under the SEP to be managed by a registered housing provider. This application was submitted just prior to the gazettal of this new SEP. However, any future consent for a boarding house on this site should have, as a minimum, a condition of consent requiring the boarding house to be managed by a registered social community housing provider. In conclusion, our association would request the panel not support the application in its current form due to its scale and bulk and for the reasons outlined above. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. Do any members of the panel have any questions? No? No, I don't have any questions either, so thank you very much. Elise, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr Chairperson and panel members. I'm Councillor Elise Borg and I represent the Cog Bay Ward of Georges River Council, and I'm speaking today on behalf of Mr Subhash Garg, the owner of number 4 Shaw Street, and other neighbouring residents of Shaw Street who have asked me to represent them and present their concerns to you today. Many of these residents are elderly and have lived in Shaw Street for 40 to 50 years and have English as their second language. The main concern of the neighbouring residents is that the proposed development on this tiny parcel of land is a complete overdevelopment of the site, which will have a direct negative impact on Mr Garg at number 4 Shaw Street and on the Shaw Street streetscape in general. The report outlines the areas that the development is non-compliant, and these areas reinforce the views of the neighbours that the proposal is not appropriate on this site. The neighbours are concerned about the visual bulk and scale of the development, and the report states that the first floor length should not exceed beyond 60% of the depth of the allotment. However, the proposal exceeds this, with the 6th upper level room being completely outside the 60% rule. We understand this rule is enforced for mum and dad homeowners, so why should this commercial development be given special treatment and an exemption of this rule? The impact, particularly on Mr Garg's property, will result in a dominant visual building bulk as well as increasing the intensity of the site with an extra bedroom. The impact of this departure from Council's DCP could be lessened with the removal of the 6th floor at the rear of the upper floor. The neighbours are also concerned about the negative impact of the visual streetscape of Shaw Street. The report outlines that the front of the site on Shaw Street being the narrowest at just 6 metres, which I assume you guys have seen at the site visit, the report states that it's not possible to achieve a primary and secondary facade setback in accordance with the DCP without increasing the bulk, scale and density of the development. So this statement in itself reinforces the concerns of the neighbours that this proposal is simply not suitable for the site and will result in a building that dominates the streetscape in respect to scale and bulk. The neighbours also raised concerns about the non-compliant communal open space, which is located in the southwestern corner of the site, directly adjoining Mr Garg's property at number 4 Shaw Street, as well as the rear of number 1 Hillpine Avenue. The communal open space does not comply with the minimum size requirement of 5 metres in dimension, again, due to the unsuitability of the site and the narrow site constraints. The location of this communal open space to be a recreational area for 11 unrelated occupants directly adjoining the private residence to the rear and side will likely result in excessive noise impacts on these neighbours. The last thing I want to raise is that the new housing SEP, effective from November 2021, states the boarding houses must be managed by a registered community housing provider in perpetuity, and the plan of management for this boarding house fails to identify who the caretaker of the building and the boarding house will be. If the panel is of the opinion to approve this development, then the residents request that the panel impose a condition of consent that the boarding house must be managed by a registered community housing provider in perpetuity in line with the new housing SEP. And just to wrap up, this proposal varies greatly from Council's planning controls, and for the reasons I've raised is an inappropriate development of the site, and for this reason significant variations to Council's codes and policies should not be supported. I did have a couple of questions if the panel would allow in relation to the plan of management, and I'm not sure if you've seen those. I've sent it through to the staff. So just, you have, sorry?
Yes, we'll send some material this morning.
Okay, I'll just quickly highlight those. So I wasn't sure if the current plan of management that's on the DA tracker is the current one, but the staff had confirmed that it is. So just some of the queries I had was under Item 4, minimising impacts on residents, point F. It says no smoking in areas which may affect the amenity of other residents of the boarding house or of residents of neighbouring properties. I'm just asking the question if that could be more specific, because one would assume that the smoking will be occurring in the communal outdoor space, which is directly adjoining to the neighbours at the rear of the property. Point I. States that all visitors are to respect and adhere to the rules of the plan of management and can be refused entry at the discretion of the boarding house caretaker if visitors are disruptive, intoxicated or abusive. So the report that has been presented to you states that there is no caretaker on site. So my question is, how would this be enforced in reality? Point K says that the outdoor communal area is not used between Monday to Sunday, 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., and Sundays and public holidays between 10 p.m. and 5 p.m. So I'm just querying those hours, if that's correct, 10 p.m. to 5 p.m., or if it's a mistake and the reference to Sundays being in there twice. So obviously the hours of use of the outdoor communal area will be quite important to the residents. So if we could just get some clarity on that. The display of house rules. The house rules are to be clearly displayed, and that's a detail the following. And it says, including border behaviour, including that no smoking or cooking be permitted in the bedrooms. But each room has a kitchenette, so I'm just questioning what that rule, how that applies. Again, in the plan of management, it talks about the duties of the caretaker, and it says the owner of the boarding house is to appoint a living caretaker, a boarding house tenant, which will include the following. And again, just the discrepancy that the report that you have been presented indicates there's no living caretaker, but the plan of management infers there is a living caretaker. So if we could just get clarity on that. And then the last item was just around waste management and recycling, item 10. It says the occupiers are responsible for the collection arrangements, and it says including the servicing of special waste such as sharps and or sanitary napkin receptacles. So it's just a question, how will occupiers who may be there for a month, 2 months, 3 months, like a short period of time, be able to safely manage the safe and sanitary removal of sharps and sanitary napkin receptacles? So that were just some questions on the plan of management. So thank you for your time. Thanks.
Panel members, do you have any questions? No. Nor do I. I think your concerns have been well expressed. Thank you. The third person to address the panel is Anthony Charbel. Please come forward, Mr. Charbel. Of course, if you wish to both come up, that's absolutely fine. Okay. And just for the record, Rod Chamlui is also coming to the table to address the panel. You've got the floor.
Thank you. Sorry, can you just turn the microphone on? Just press the button. Yep. Thank you. Well, I guess we're here. I am the town planner and Anthony Charbel is the architect, and I guess we're here to answer any questions that the panel may have or clarify any information that needs to be required to support the application.
I have one question, but I will defer firstly. Do you have any questions? Or... Yep. You would have heard from both the previous speakers that they feel the boarding house, if it's approved, should be managed by a community housing provider. Could you let us know what your thoughts are about that particular issue?
The application was lodged under the Affordable Housing Step 2009, which did not require a housing provider. The proposed boarding house will be run by a real estate agent. Currently, we own 2 other boarding houses that's under the Georges River, and they are operated by real estate agents, and we haven't had any issues with those. So there is no plans to or requirements to run this under a social housing provider.
And so the estate, you're confident the estate agent can in fact manage all of this to ensure compliance with the plan of management and other things?
Absolutely. I have 2 other boarding houses that I run, and the real estate agent enforces the plan of management, and we've never had any issues or complaints with the others. And we plan to run this one the same way.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question.
My question relates to the communal open space.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the rearmost pocket being used, given the way it's proposed to be landscaped in the documents we've been shown? So I'm talking about the one in the far corner. Because usually communal open space has some elements that people would walk on it, sit on it, enjoy it. And this on the landscape home, there seems to be just a garden bed in that. Can you just comment on that?
So, first of all, just in terms of the location, the location was specifically placed at the back of the property for a number of reasons. The first one was the orientation of the site lends itself to having solar access at the rear of the property, and we need to provide a certain amount of hours of solar access to that space. And then the second was to align it with the private open spaces of all the adjoining properties, so that all the same uses were sharing the same boundaries. The communal open space is just a lawn space. It hasn't been detailed, but we're happy to provide a detail where there's facilities, chairs, tables, and so on. It's not hard stand, and it's a landscaped area. It's connected through a smaller garden that is directly opposite the communal open space. The communal room, and then there's a pathway that directs you to that portion of it.
Okay, so I think one of the problems we're having is the landscape plan doesn't allow you to walk on that rear. It's designed in a way that it's a garden bed. So, I mean, this is something we can address, but
Yeah,
it
sure.
seems to be,
landscape.
you know, we understand common open space would have some characteristics of lawns
Yeah.
and those things.
The communal open space on the landscaping plan, now that landscaping plan may or may not have been updated, but it showed planting of 40 low-rise plants.
Okay, I don't think it was updated then. Yeah, because originally we started with the communal open space directly opposite the common room.
Yeah.
And then when we went through our shadow study, we weren't getting the required solar access in that space, and that's when we reconfigured the design to move it back to the back portion. We should have provided an updated landscaping plan, but we can do that.
So essentially, the aim of it is to have a turfed space. The others that I have benches and like a timber table. They're all temporary structures, not within the ground. It's not really an area for all people to congregate at any one time, but it provides a outdoor space essentially. No barbecue area or anything like that is provided.
Thank you. I'll just
Yeah.
defer again to my colleague.
One more question. There's a condition. Have you read the conditions of consent? Is there anything you wanted to comment on in the draft conditions of consent?
Is there one in particular that you're referring to?
Not particularly, but we just hope you've had an opportunity to review them, and if you had anything to say, now would be your opportunity.
No, they all seem standard conditions to me.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming in and making yourself available to answer our questions.
Sorry, just quickly, would you like me to address any of the comments from the objectors?
Yes, if they're beyond the points that we've already discussed, please feel free to do so.
Okay, so obviously it's a constrained site to a certain extent, and a lot of the I wouldn't say significant non-compliances, but the non-compliances that have arisen from it have been addressed through design, and they've become apparent because of the orientation of the block, the awkwardness of the shape of the block. So where we have a non-compliance in the setback, that's only at the front of the site and isolated to the front, and then we have quite a significant setback. Now that addresses two issues: one with overshadowing to the neighbour, and the other issue is separation for acoustic and visual privacy. And the third, it does allow an opportunity for us to utilise the lane to present the building, which would be reflective of future development of the B1 zone. The other issue that was raised was about the length of the first floor. If you look at a broader aerial shot, number 6 and number 8 Shore Street are actually 2 metres or so approximately longer in their first floor presentation than where we sit. It's just an anomaly of our direct neighbour, but the other 2-storey development further down, just 2 blocks over, are consistently aligned, and we're set in from that. Length of building, we're compliant at facade, we're compliant in terms of height. The character, I think it's well addressed that we've taken positive cues from the pitch roofs, the hip roofs, the masonry built form on the ground floor, picking up on the on the single-story dwellings, and then what we've done is gone for a lightweight top. We've broken up the roof form. We've broken it up into multiple pavilions. We've continued that architectural character down the lane to activate that lane. I think that's all I have, or that's all I captured.
No, look, again, thank you for responding to those concerns that have been raised in the submissions and in the two addresses this afternoon. So thank you for coming along, and we'll now, on that particular one, we'll also retire to make our decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the end of the presentations or questions from submitters on the Shaw Street property. So we'll move on now to Mr. Littis, who will be here to address the committee, or the panel rather, about the development application for extending the trading hours at the Penshurst Hotel at 29 Penshurst Street, Penshurst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Littis, one of our colleagues who couldn't join us for that part of the discussion of the meeting has now just rejoined us. And I think we're now ready to go, so thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Panel members, I take it that you may have received a submission that we've made. We've reviewed the report. We support the recommendation and just seek to clarify a couple of conditions, really, and I can give further clarification on one of them. The first one is simply just to be stating the hours of operation of the beer garden under condition 4 for the premises, just so that the totality of the hours is on the consent. And then the other matter was just condition 13, which I can further clarify just in regard to the compliances with relevant standards to the background music in the acoustic report. So the live music restriction is fine, but we just seek to get a clarification not to include amplified music to be prohibited in the beer garden.
And they were the two matters you raised. Just so you're aware, yes, we have received, the panel has received a copy of the correspondence you sent in the other day.
Okay, good.
We've had a chance to look at that and understand it. I think we've had a look at the site and got a reasonable idea about what is the subject, or the hours issue. It seems to us that the application did not formally look to turn over the condition that was in the previous development consent issued by the Land and Environment Court about music in the beer garden.
No. No. So all we're raising is that the acoustic report that was submitted to support this application noted that there was it was actually measured with 60 patrons with background music. So we're just getting a clarification. We didn't want our client to be breached for a condition where he's got speakers in the beer garden.
Sorry, can you just repeat that? I didn't catch all of it properly.
Sorry, the acoustic report that was submitted to support this application,
yes,
it had an assessment of the beer garden included in it, and it had 60 patrons with background music. So we just didn't want our client to end up being breached on this particular consent if there was that restriction on the amplified music in the beer garden, because it's already been assessed and it complies. So that's the maximum number of people you can get in that area, and so it assessed people in there speaking with background music. So we just don't want, and we've had that instance happen where unfortunately somebody comes along and says you've got speakers in there, you're not complying with your condition and you get breached. So we're just trying to get that particular condition clarified. Live music, we understand restriction because it's not designed or can't comply with that requirement in terms of noise controls, but for amplified music it can.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you want to follow?
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up to that, James. But you said that that's covered off in the acoustic report, but is that covered in the statement of environmental effects and the actual description of what's being sought in this consent?
It didn't seek to do anything about the beer garden, so if that's why we're just. I mean, in one instance, I understand what you're saying. It wouldn't matter anyway, because if you just leave this consent not to include the beer garden at all, then it wouldn't arise. I would take it, but that would mean that what we've asked for in condition 4, you just leave the condition as it is, relating just to the to those particular parts of the premises that it applies to, which is extension of our zone. But we just get it complicated with it being for the whole of the premises, and sometimes misinterpretations happen. So we're just trying to get further clarification in this consent to include all of the hours of the hotel under it, just for simplicity's sake.
Which I guess begs the question that we were wondering, in that case, why a new DA versus a modification if you wanted to keep it as one consistent, consolidated approval?
Oh, because we
distinction?
couldn't guarantee. Yeah, well, we couldn't guarantee that we would get a determination to be positive in that instance. So we want to reserve the client's right in terms of the other application he's already got.